All right, welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're jumping into a story that stretches across a full century. It's this incredible battle over money, power, and politics that got its start in the American West, but trust me, it still echoes in the debates we're having right now.
So let's get right to it. Why would one state, just one, ban all corporate money from its politics for 100 years? It's a fantastic question, and the answer isn't some dry political theory. It's a story of corruption so wild, it honestly sounds like something out of a movie. And this whole thing, this entire fight, it plays out over a perfect 100 years. It kicks off in 1912 with this really radical citizen-led law, and it all comes to a head in 2012 with a super controversial, and I mean deeply divided, Supreme Court decision.
Okay, so to really get why this law even existed in the first place, we've got to rewind, like way back to the Gilded Age. We need to meet the men who, well, they didn't just run Montana. They pretty much owned it. The Copper Kings.
So yeah, there were three main players here: William Clark, Marcus Daly, and F. Augustus Heinze. These guys were total industrial titans, and they were locked in this brutal, no-holds-barred rivalry. But here's the thing. They didn't just fight it out in the business world. Nope. Their battlefield was the entire political system of Montana, and each one of them had his own special way of playing the game.
And you want to talk about brazen? Just look at William A. Clark. This guy, he didn't just decide to run for the U.S. Senate in 1899. He decided he was going to buy it. Seriously. See, back then, state legislators were the ones who picked U.S. senators. So Clark, he spent what would be almost $8 million today doing just one thing, literally walking around, handing out envelopes stuffed with cash to buy their votes. It was that simple and that corrupt. And that right there just perfectly captures how these guys operated. I mean, it wasn't just about buying a Senate seat. The Copper Kings controlled, well, everything. They bought up major newspapers so they could control the story. They installed their own pocket judges to control the courts. They'd even pay off a voter's mortgage to make sure they had their vote. It wasn't just influencing democracy, they owned it.
And the wildest part? Clark didn't even try to hide it. When he got called out on it, he famously shot back with this incredibly cynical, but you gotta admit, pretty memorable line. For him, this wasn't corruption. This was just how business was done.
I mean, this situation got so out of hand, it became a running joke across the country. Even the great Mark Twain got in on it, quipping that in Montana, corruption wasn't even offensive anymore. It had become so common, it was just the air you breathed.
Okay, so Clark's move was straight up cash for politicians, but his rival, F. Augustus Heinze, he was playing a different game, a more cunning one, you could say. He didn't just want to bribe the players, he figured out how to rig the whole rule book. And he did it using this really weird, kind of obscure mining regulation called the Apex Law. Now, hang with me here. It basically said that if a vein of ore, like copper, started on your property, the highest point, or the apex, you could legally follow it and mine it wherever it went. And I mean wherever, even if it tunneled right under your competitor's land. So Heinze, being the schemer he was, turned this weird law into a brilliant three-step heist. Step 1, he'd buy up these tiny, totally worthless scraps of land right next to his rivals' huge, rich mines. Step 2, he'd march into court and claim that actually their massive copper veins technically started on his little plot. And then, step 3, his hand-picked pocket judges would bang the gavel and make it all legal. He was literally robbing them blind, with the law on his side. So, after decades of this, of watching their state get bought, sold, and basically plundered by these massive corporations, the people of Montana, they finally had enough. It was time for a revolt. And they didn't just protest, they fought back with something powerful, a citizen-led ballot initiative. And here's the beautiful part. Every single line of the law they wrote was a direct response to the corruption they had lived through. They saw the problem up close, and they designed a very, very specific solution to fix it. The law they created, the Corrupt Practices Act of 1912, was one of the toughest in the entire country. It basically built a giant firewall between corporate money and their politics. It made it flat out illegal for companies to dip into their profits to influence elections. If they wanted to spend money, it had to come from a separate fund, from individuals, voluntarily. No more corporate war chests. And believe it or not, for almost a full century, that firewall held. That law, born out of the War of the Copper Kings, became a fundamental part of Montana's identity, a shield against the kind of corporate takeover that had nearly destroyed their state. It really did shape a whole different kind of politics there for generations.
But then came a case that would detonate the national landscape. Citizens United v. FEC. You've probably heard of it. In 2010, the Supreme Court made a landmark ruling that, essentially, corporations have First Amendment free speech rights, and that spending money on federal elections is a form of that speech.
And you can see where this is going, right? That decision immediately put Montana's 100-year-old law right in the crosshairs. The argument was pretty simple. If corporations can spend freely on a national level, then how can a state like Montana tell them they can't? So, of course, the fight went all the way to the top, the U.S. Supreme Court. And then, in 2012, exactly 100 years to the year after the law was passed, the court struck it down. It was a razor-thin 5-4 decision, but they basically said the Citizens United ruling now applied to the states too. So when you boil it all down, here's the thing to remember. Montana's law wasn't some abstract political philosophy. It was a real-world tool, It was forged in the fire of this incredibly specific and corrupt period of history, and it was designed with one goal: to make sure that history never, ever repeated itself.
And that leaves us with a really tough question, one that goes way beyond just Montana. When a law is born from a very real, very painful historical problem, who gets to decide when that history doesn't matter anymore?